Welcome to my presentation. I would like to introduce my teaching resource which I used in teaching algebra for a class. I chose this topic because algebra is an essential part of mathematics, as it helps to model situations or procedures by translating them into algebraic expressions or formulae, says the National Curriculum for England. Algebra is often dreaded by students. However, I believe if it is taught well, algebra can be mastered just as successfully as any other part of the curriculum. The National Curriculum in England aims to ensure that through the mathematics content, all pupils should be taught to develop fluency, reason mathematically, and solve problems. Context of the class. The class where I plan to use my teaching resource is a Year 7 Maths class, which is a mixed ability class in a non-selective co-educational secondary school. The class has 31 students, 17 boys and 14 girls. There are 10 pupils with special educational needs in the class, which is a high proportion compared to the rest of the school. There are 2 pupil premium students and 2 English as a second language students within the class. The class is well behaved, engaged in lessons, and loves learning through activities. About a third of the class is very keen to participate in the lessons and give correct answers, explain working out clearly and politely. Half of the class occasionally volunteers with mixed answers, and there is a small proportion of the class, about 3 or 4 children, who find the subject difficult and struggles to keep up with the rest of the class. The class responds well to instructions. They work hard and well. When the instructions they receive are not clear, the noise level raises in the class. I have found that clear instructions and expectations help settling the class and eliminate behavioral issues. The timing of the lesson was far from ideal, as it is a period 5 lesson on a Wednesday afternoon after lunch break, when the class is not easy to motivate due to tiredness after a busy day and distracted by the thoughts of home time and after-school activities. When I was thinking about what resource to create, I considered the following theories. The class's love of activities reflects Dewey's theory of progressive education. He promoted the idea of learning by doing and experimenting rather than it being a passive experience. This supported my experience while observing the class. They understood topics and retained information better when they learned it through an activity they could participate in, rather than through pure exposition, because, as it is discussed by David Pym and Sue Johnston Wilder, exposition is a valuable tool, but one to be used with care. Too much exposition can have a rapidly deadening effect on the attention of your class, and at best you can end up talking to yourself. There are opposing opinions. One of them is by Matt Bromley. The most effective, expedient way for students to learn is for the teacher, that educated, experienced expert at the front of the room, to tell them, then show them what they need to know. Rather than designing convoluted ways of enabling a student to discover new knowledge for him or herself, perhaps as a result of engaging in a group activity, teachers should take the shortest, simplest path. They should just tell them, then show them what they need to know. Teaching styles are not to be used exclusively. Knowing each class, a teacher can find a suitable combination of the distinctive styles which can achieve the best results for the students. Considering the age group of the children, they are 12 years old, and that they are just coming from the playful and warm environment of a junior school, the firm ways of secondary school teaching would mean a great change by imposing adult standards upon those who are only growing slowly toward maturity, as Dewey says, which for me also supports the use of the slightly playful, at the same time very informative and memorable learning activities. According to Piaget's theory of stages of cognitive development of children, my class falls into the top end of the concrete operational stage by when children had the capacity to solve problems, but the problems had to be real or concrete, and they were not yet able to solve imagined or hypothetical problems, which helped me deciding of what kind of problem to use to make the children understand the task of writing expressions. Rosenshine's principles of instruction in the classroom helped in building up the lesson from beginning to end and find the place for the activity with my teaching resource. I started with a do now task that would help the students recall and practice to translate worded instructions into the language of mathematics. During the use of my teaching resource, I was aiming to achieve Principle 2, which says not only to introduce new information in small amounts, but to resist presenting the next point until the previous point has been understood. It materialized in splitting my planned activity into 2 sections between 2 lessons. In the first lesson, writing expression 1, we concentrated on expressions with addition and subtraction, and in the second lesson, we extended the learning to include multiplication and division of the variables. My teaching resource activity. The source of my activity is from Stephanie Prestige and Pat Burke's Generalizing Arithmetic, an Alternative to Algebra, or Things to Do with a Plastic Bag article. I have combined 2 activities from the above article, which helps pupils getting a grasp of using letters in the place of numbers and creating simple expressions. For the activity, I prepared 5 mini whiteboards before the lesson by writing a number 24 on the first one, 2 years younger, 5 years younger, 3 years older, and 8 years older on the others. First, I asked one student to come out to the front of the class to hold a board with 24 written on it. I told the class, let's imagine this is his age, and I asked one more student to come to the front of the class to hold the next mini whiteboard, 3 years older, written on it. Now I asked the class to have a look at the 2 boards, think carefully for 10 seconds, and tell me how old the second child is and how they worked out this answer. When they told me 27, and they reached the answer by adding 3 to the initial age of 24, I wrote the expression 24 plus 3 on the wall board. Then I sent the second child back to sit down and asked the third child to come up to the front to hold up the next board with 8 years older on it. We went through the same routine. I asked the class to think about how old the third child is and how they got the answer. Consequently, the expression 24 plus 8 went onto the board. When I chose the order of the boards to be used, I consciously chose the adding tasks first because addition resonates with the children's thinking better than subtraction. When we completed the expressions with addition and the class was happy with the process, we moved on to the next phase and discussed the cases of younger children. We followed the same process with the other 2 prepared mini whiteboards, 2 and 5 years younger, to see how we create expressions. First, a child who accompanied the 24-year-old in front of the class held up the 2 years younger sign. Again, I asked the class to have a think, consider their answer, and let me know what operation they would do to figure out the age of the 2 years younger child. The question was not met with difficulties. Several children volunteered to say 24 subtract 2, which I wrote on the wall board, 24 minus 2. We repeated the process for the 5 years younger instruction. A different child came to the front of the class to hold up the board. Most of the class put their hands up wanting to give the answer. They clearly understood the task and the working out method. As a result, we had the 4th expression on the wall board, 24 minus 5. Next, I thanked everyone for their contribution and sent the children back to their seats and asked the new child to stand in the middle. This time, instead of a number for their age, I told the class, let's imagine we don't know how old he or she is, so I will put the initial of their name, N, in the example on the mini whiteboard to represent his or her age. The rest of the process was very similar to the first round. I asked the second child to hold the 3 years older sign next to the board with the letter N on it. Now I asked the class again if they could tell me how old the second child is and how they got to their answer. I gave them some time to think, and after about 10-20 seconds, a volunteer correctly said N plus 3. So I wrote this expression next to the 24 plus 3 expression on the wall board. We did the whole activity with all the different boards again, now writing the algebraic expressions on the wall board, N plus 8, N minus 2, and N minus 5 in the same order as we did in the previous arithmetic exercise. When everyone sat back in their seats at the end of the activity, I thanked them for their effort, and I drew the conclusion for the class to see what the similarities are and how we can use the letters in place of numbers if we do not know the exact values. My aim was to make the children understand that algebraic expressions in mathematics describe values despite containing letters and numbers, because knowing that 3 more than x is x plus 3, and that x plus 3 is itself a number, a powerful concept and essential for working in this area of mathematics, as stated by Stephanie Prestige and Pat Perks. The activity proved to be an extremely popular one with the class. The children were very keen to take part and enjoyed the live action, as we called it. When I planned the activity, I considered a high proportion of special educational needs students in the class and how it would affect them. Would it support their participation and understanding, or would it hinder their learning? Most of the SEN children in the class have attention and processing problems, and reading the individual support files, I found that most of them prefers having movement breaks and need the information chunked. The physical movements within the activity fitted in perfectly with the required movement breaks, and I made sure to select as many students to participate, either to be at the front of the class or to give answers as possible. My experience was that the activity supported the learning of the entire class. During the following questions and worded problems, they proved that they understood the principles. However, there was a recurring question during work problems when the answer was an algebraic expression. It took some time for the children to accept that the answer is not a single number, but an expression. Initially, they were trying to add the variable to the number and create a single-figure answer, and this misconception popped up a few times in the follow-up practice questions and following lessons. Just as Kucherman in 1978 described in his work, this is one of the common misconceptions during the introduction of algebra. He called it the lack of closure. In arithmetic, the expressions can be worked out, reduced to one number, but an algebraic expression like x plus 3 is the final answer. If the variable does not have a value to substitute into the expression, we have nothing more to do with it. Another significant problem I found was the students not being able to translate worded problems into mathematical operations. For example, when we moved on from addition and subtraction to other operations, they repeatedly mixed up the meaning of sum and product, were not sure what total and difference and square meant. To overcome this difficulty, I have used a series of similar questions as a starter activity, which I slightly modified from lesson to lesson, according to the suggestions of Rosenshine's theory in reviewing material. His first principle explains that daily practice of reviewing previous learning is one part of helping students acquire an expertise in the taught subject, to free up working memory and allow deeper understanding. Evaluating the impact of my resource. The activity in action was observed by 2 teachers in 2 different lessons who were very positive and complimentary about the way the children engaged with the problem and how they interacted with me during the lesson. For a lasting effect, though, there must be a follow-up practice in the form of practice questions and independent learning tasks. I feel the activity had a real positive impact on the students' learning because instead of just seeing expressions written on the lesson slides, the students became parts of the created expressions by physically being part of them, by holding the mini whiteboards with different components that made up the expressions. This fulfilled Dewey's criteria for progressive education of learning by doing, although there would be room for improvement by introducing the experimenting segment. As a next step, it would be interesting to try if the students had the choice of creating the rule instruction boards instead of me writing 3 years older, and so on, what kind of expressions we would end up with. To extend the activity this way would stretch the imagination of the class and could show them that with mathematics we can express most things in life, fulfilling the purpose of study of the national curriculum. A high-quality mathematics education therefore provides a foundation for understanding the world, the ability to reason mathematically, an appreciation of the beauty and power of mathematics, and a sense of enjoyment and curiosity about the subject. Thank you for your attention.